welcome. We're so happy to have you with us today. For those of you that are new to us and new to the U.S. Superyacht Association, we are the only nonprofit trade association in the world that focuses our efforts on the large yacht market, on the special needs, distinctions, and all the issues that face the companies and the businesses that support these big, beautiful yachts that we see all over the world. Those of us in the industry that know that we're all a bunch of big floating economic drivers that make the world happen. And in this crazy world, we want to make sure that things continue to happen. So during this downtime where we've been having some struggles with our COVID-19, we're kind of pushed into this Zoom box. So I appreciate you all taking the time today to come out and spend a little bit of time with us. And as we at the USSA continue our weekly seminar series to help educate you, our business owners, on how that you can grow your business, protect your business. We've had some great programs on business development, on marketing. This week, our program is your company really ready to open? Because, I mean, I know here in Florida, finally, this week, Broward County finally opened a Dade. We finally opened the doors to some limited access. I know, I'm excited. I went and got my nails done. I know that sounds really silly and petty, but for stick-on nail girls, this has been a real treat. So Broward and Dade have opened. I know there are other places in the country that are opening up. And all along, USSA has been working with our partners, our co-workers across the country to make it so that the yachting industry stays relevant, stays essential, so our businesses are able to stay working. But now that people are coming back, now that the employees are coming back and you're trying to maneuver those strategies as to how to make that happen, is your company really ready? Are you prepared? Because, you know, as much as we've all been in this together, you know, now's when the rubber's going to hit the road. Let's be very clear. There are going to be some bad actors out there that are going to look for ways to manipulate the system. They're going to look for ways to take advantage of systems. So as businesses, as business owners, it really is our job to our best of our ability to protect our staff, our customers, our team, ourselves, as much as humanly possible. And so with that, so we thought it would be important to say, you know, what are the legal and liability pitfalls that are possible that could possibly kind of hurt you and your business in this post-pandemic, or not quite post, in this pandemic world. But let me first start off by saying, and putting this on the record because we are recording this program is not designed to be a legally binding direction. This is a conversation with our attorneys, insurance, and some professionals in the cleaning industry to give you some ideas and suggestions. We always want to make sure that you talk to your own lawyers, talk to your professionals, or if you don't have a labor attorney, please reach out to Lindsay. And if you don't have a good agent that is going to be able to help lead you through these processes, call Chris. And if you don't have a trained professional, and you've been just kind of cleaning your office and your yard, you know, Ryan and his company, I know, will stand by and help you after all of this. So this program is not designed to be a legally binding direction as to say that this is how it has to go. There are lots of other options that you may take. So with that, just want to say it on the record. So our presenters today, I'm very excited. And hang on, I have to do this because I think it's funny. No, I don't want to stop video. 1 second. So, oh, where'd I go? I'm a dork. Hang on. Okay. How do I do this now? I can't do it. Oh well, I'm messing it up. Julie, help me. Start my video. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I know I'm such a dork. Anyway, so because we have no fun these days, our first presenter, Ryan Jurney, is with Gator Janitorial. And for those of you from Florida, from the state of Florida, you know, in the college football world, there's two major teams, one of them being the Florida State University, of which I am a graduate, Florida State University. Oh, hang on a second, Mr. Ernst. And the University of Florida, Florida Gators. We have a couple of our presenters today that are graduates of the University of Florida. So I thought for fun, we would at least have a little friendly college showdown. Now, plus my right hand over here now on my screen to the left, Julie Sack is also a graduate of the University of Florida. But so we're going to start with a little cheers to the beginnings of some sort of sports and hopefully college football in the fall. Ryan Jurney, owner and CEO of Gator Janitorial, as I said, is a graduate of the University of Florida, also a lawyer from St. Thomas University, and was an assistant public defender in Dade County. He joined his family business and it's a full-service security company and the owner of CEO of Gator Protection. So they are of Jurney Associates. These guys can do everything. They can keep you safe at the front door. They can keep you safe inside and out. Please welcome Ryan Jurney. Also from the University of Florida, Chris Coleman from Oversea Yacht Insurance. Chris is the Director of Commercial Marine Insurance and a Vice President of the Young Professionals in Yachting, one of our great groups that supports our up-and-coming stars in the super yacht industry. Chris's focus is on property and casualty, as well as workers' comp, and as it relates to the marine industry. He is a plethora of knowledge in all things insurance, so please join me in welcoming Chris Coleman. And last but certainly not least, our beautiful lady of the crowd, Lindsay Massillon from Fowler White Burnett, another one of our members. She's an associate in the commercial litigation and employment practice groups. Very tough job, I'm sure you have right now, Lindsay, as these companies are trying to thread the needle. Do we lay off? Do we keep? Et cetera, et cetera. But Lindsay represents the management against all employment-related claims, including FLSA, whistleblower suits, violations. She has a passion for counseling employers and helping them avoid litigation. We love you on this call today because that's the real big purpose of helping us out here. And of course, Fowler White Burnett is a very well-respected firm here in South Florida. So welcome Lindsay Massillon from Fowler White Burnett. So with that, I'm going to start with Lindsay. And Lindsay, if you could, let's guide our group that are here on the call through some of the things that they could see in this COVID world as to what's going on.
Hi, good morning, everyone. So yeah, there has actually already started, we're starting to see some litigation related to wages and hour issues. Also, I think one of the topics that we're going to see a lot of is employees complaining that their employer is not keeping a safe workspace. So one of the first things that I wanted to talk about, because I think it's on everybody's mind, is how can we prepare the workspace to be safe? There's a general duty clause, so people should be familiar with OSHA, which is the Occupational Safety and Health Administration. OSHA has specific guidelines for certain industries, but they have a general duty clause, which says that employers have to keep a workplace that is free from hazards that are likely to cause either death or serious injury. So that, of course, is very expansive, and it applies to all industries, all employers, no matter their size. All employees are expected to be keeping a safe and healthy, hazard-free workspace. So when we're talking about pandemic issues, it's the things that we're probably all thinking of already: sanitizing, encouraging your employees to be mindful of hand washing, setting up locations where they can either use alcohol-based sanitized hand sanitizer, social distancing measures, recreating or kind of restructuring your workplace, and taking into consideration all the guidelines from the CDC. So when OSHA says that an employer needs to maintain a safe workplace, they're saying, go look at these CDC guidelines and make sure that you're following all of their recommendations. And I will tell you that the CDC, the Department of Labor, and the various other federal agencies are pretty consistently updating their guidance, because we are living in this world that is uncertain and things are changing week by week, day by day. So something that I'm recommending to my clients is, if it's possible, think about setting up a risk assessment or post-pandemic team who can start looking at policies and helping implement policies that are going to keep your workplace safe. Because there are so many updates to this guidance, it may be helpful to have a couple point people whose job it is, whose part of their job will be to just keep checking out on the CDC guidelines, looking at the different rules and regulations, and just staying on top of everything. So that would be my number one tip, is be mindful of the guidelines. What the CDC is recommending, encouraging sick employees, if they're telling you that they're feeling ill or exhibiting some symptoms of the COVID-19 virus, they're encouraging them to stay home. And again, think about your policies. I'll talk a little bit later about the sick leave, the paid sick leave, which is covering all employers who have fewer than 500 employees. That's the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. That is requiring that certain employees receive paid leave for certain things that are related to this pandemic. But I would encourage you as employers to just take a look at your policies. If you don't have a paid time off policy, you may want to consider sitting down with your employment law attorney and consulting with them to develop something that makes sense and is actually feasible and viable for the company.
Lindsay, can I interrupt very quickly here for a quick second? A lot of our businesses in our industry in this, which sounds so insane. I know we're in the superyacht industry, and yet so many of our companies are small mom and pop organizations, many without formal policies for pretty much anything. How rigid do you think they should be at this point? And to what extent, as far as like documentation, if you're saying, I love the concept of having a team and having those, kind of accountability and such. I mean, how much documentation should they do as far as taking photographs of new workspaces, having them be very visual, and actually taking measuring tapes and measuring those things? How rigid and how really staying to those rules do they really have to be?
So I think the first thing is to just assess your risk. If you are a employer and really your employees are not customer facing and they're not seeing the general public or involved with the general public on a regular basis, your employees' risk is lower. So if you also have a small office, it actually probably should be a little bit easier to start implementing these social distancing guidelines. So I don't think that you necessarily need to take photos, but certainly even sending out an email saying, here's what we are doing to change our workspace, I think is at least helpful to show, should an employee say, my workspace is full of hazards, they're increasing my exposure, and I don't feel safe, and say they were to make some type of complaint to OSHA. What can you do to show them that, no, here's what we're doing, here's how we're changing? So as far as strict, I don't think it's necessary to, like you mentioned, taking photos, but I think just showing your employees that you are making changes if it's feasible to do so. So if you have 3 people in your office and they're already kind of spread out, they have their own areas. If you're doing things to make sure that any high traffic areas in your office, you're limiting that. The common areas, your cafeterias, your break rooms. If you have any place where you have your employees kind of gathering to either clock in or clock out, maybe you're staggering the times that they do that. And if it makes sense to separate employees, if you have more of an open working format, if you can spread them out, just even those small changes for a small office, it's not going to cost very much. And then just encouraging them to wash their hands, sanitize. If you have someone who's actually going around and cleaning the desks, making sure your employees aren't sharing supplies, little things like that are, again, that's of no cost really to encourage your employees and to just educate them. And it's showing that you're taking steps and you're recognizing, okay, this is different. We're going to do things differently. So I think it's just something as simple as sending out an email and saying, okay, this is what we're doing to change the workspace, if it needs to be changed.
Right. So now in terms of that, so you don't think it has to necessarily be a written policy, everybody has to sign off, this is what we're doing. I mean, and then what happens, say I do have an employee that says, hi, my goodness, I'm feeling so, you're avoiding my space, or this other employee is stepping within my 6-foot boundary, and they report you. I mean, what are the things that can happen? I mean, what would, to my company, where could I be at risk and what could conceivably happen?
So one of the points that I think a lot of employers, unfortunately, are going to see is exactly what you're saying, employees refusing to come to work. Maybe it's not even them complaining about other employees getting in their space, but let's say you had to maybe furlough or lay off some employees, but you're ready to start bringing them back to the office, and they're refusing. They're saying, no, listen, I don't feel safe. That's going to trigger a couple different things. So first, when you're talking about a complaint to OSHA, I mean, it's just something, it's another thing that you as an employer probably don't want to spend your day walking with an investigator around your office and answering questions. So that would be the risk there, is just having to deal with an OSHA investigation. And we don't know exactly what that is going to look, how strict is OSHA going to be with this? Because I imagine they're going to see an increase in these types of complaints of this, violation of this general duty clause. And right. We don't know what that's going to look like. So that's the one thing. The other thing is, if you have an employee maybe who's refusing because they're concerned about exposure, it should trigger you as the employer to dig a little bit deeper. It's a red flag, right? So why do you not feel safe? Is it just you're just anxious about it? Is there something that the employer can do to assuage their fears? Say, listen, I understand your concern, but here's what we're doing to keep you safe. That may help. Another issue I think which may happen is, say you have an employee, and say you're an employer and you have 15 or more employees. You're covered by the Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA. That requires that the employer provide a reasonable accommodation for an employee who has a disability. Now you may say, okay, somebody refusing to come to work, is that a disability? No, but why? Is it because they have generalized anxiety disorder? Is it because they have severe asthma and it puts them at a higher risk? They're not exhibiting symptoms now, they didn't test positive, but they're concerned because their underlying condition increases their risk. Again, as the employer, what the law requires is that you're engaging in this interactive process. So communication is going to be very key. And I'm encouraging my clients to, as much as you can, where it's not burdensome to your business. You still have to run a business. You still have to make money. But if you can, be flexible and understanding. And that's really just on a human basis, let alone as an employer. but understand that these new times are going to bring different concerns that may not have arisen before. So again, as far as what the law is going to require, the ADA again does require that you engage in the interactive process. So, okay, this person now says, well, I have anxiety and this is exacerbating my condition. Is there an accommodation? Is there something that the employer can do, again, that can accommodate this employee? Does that mean working from home? Does that mean maybe limiting their hours or taking staggered shifts? Is it just, again, reassuring them or maybe placing them in a different office? Doing something that's going to make the employee feel comfortable. One of the things too is that as employers were bringing back employees, I was being asked if they can just exclude, say they have an employee, Susan, who's pregnant. Can they say, well, I don't want to bring Susan back because she's at high risk, or I don't want to bring Mark back because he's 70 years old? And the EEOC, the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, is going to say, no, you don't, it's not for the employer to make that determination. But again, if the employee is coming to you and saying, I'm concerned here, here's why, it is on the employer to kind of dig a little bit deeper and find out what is the issue. And can it be fixed? Can it be limited?
If you don't mind, I'd like to chime in here real quick, just to kind of bring down the level of anxiety probably everybody has surrounding all of this. It is important to note, OSHA has issued documentation pertaining to COVID, the OSHA 3990, and they have indicated that they are not going to assume a causal relationship to complaints or causes pertaining to COVID in the workplace. They're not going to make those assumptions. So if in fact you do receive a complaint and it's not a death sentence, certainly they will do their investigation and their reporting, but it is not something that they are going to basically beeline straight towards. They have to have something more than just a basic causal relationship there pertaining to being in the workplace.
Oh, I totally understand and completely agree with you, Chris. I think more of the challenges with regards to Lindsay's comments are more ADA, EEOC, and those types of things where because now, of course, I'm using the Mickey Mouse of all of the acronyms, all of the people out there are having so much PTSD from all of the stress and all the media. There's a lot of people that I'm so stunned that are still at this point, they're not leaving their homes. I mean, the world's opening and they're more afraid today to go to anywhere, that they're saying that, and that there was a survey on the news last night that still 57% of Americans are afraid and think that it's too soon, that they're afraid to go out of their homes. So the concept of stress or anxiety, creating it so that I can't go to work, is very real. But I mean, again, as Lindsay's saying, to me as a business owner, how am I supposed to run a business if I have my main customer service agent who refuses then to come to work because they're afraid of being in front of a person, even though I may have put up a plastic shield, even though I've wrapped them in bubble wrap, even though I've, put hand washing statements and sprayed them with Clorox, they're still terrified. And I know I'm being very mocking and seemingly condescending. And I don't mean it to be that way, because the fear is very real to these people. But to me as a business owner, then it said, now what, so now then you're put in a position of having to defend yourself so that person is no longer necessarily qualified to do their job at that point. I mean, is that a realistic assessment, Lindsay? If this person refuses, and even through interactive accommodation, and we need that person to be there in person, am I now as a business owner able to go through the process of termination because that person is no longer able to conduct their job because of some sort of COVID fear?
So whenever you're dealing with any type of disability type issue and you're looking at accommodations, it is a very fact-specific inquiry. So I, again, cannot stress that each time, an employer kind of is faced with this, that they're consulting with an employment law attorney, that they're taking the steps necessary, because there's really no one-size-fits-all answer to this. What I will say, though, is that the ADA says that an accommodation needs to be given as long as it doesn't cause the employer an undue hardship. And again, that's a legal term of art, and it's going to be very fact specific as to whether or not this employee's, you've given them an accommodation, perhaps that accommodation was reasonable, but they're still refusing. And now it's kind of where the rubber meets the road, how is this going, what are all the circumstances around it? Is there anything else that can be done? Can you give this person leave as an accommodation? That's what ultimately, should there be a complaint? So say you go forward with making the decision to terminate their employment, and they file a charge with the EEOC, because that's the agency that's going to look at a claim of disability discrimination. Did they have something that would qualify as a disability? B, what steps did the employer take? The more steps, the more accommodations, the more flexibility that you're able to show as an employer, that's going to help demonstrate that you engaged in this process, you did what you could. If ultimately there are no other accommodations that can be made, or if there was an accommodation, it just wouldn't be reasonable, it's not going to allow you to operate your business, then that's where, again, it's going to be a determination by ultimately a judge or jury about whether or not that was an undue burden. So I again, can't stress enough to really take case by case. And if you need to come to that conclusion, I would say, ensure that you've discussed it and you've exhausted your efforts, and that you've kind of explored everything else. And interactive doesn't mean that the employee should be talking, obviously, with you as well. So maybe they have something that, hey, if we could do this, we can change my shift maybe, or if I can work from home on these days, or if I can have leave, unpaid maybe, but if I can have more leave. If that's something that the employer can do, then I would just encourage that, again, being flexible. So I hope that answered the question, but
very much. There's so much still unknown. I mean, we're still kind of like, every day brings new changes to nearly everything. I mean, it's like you're opening, oh, nope, they decided we're closing again. Nope, we're opening. And so there's so much unknown, but I think that your comments have been so spot on about the flexibility. And I think a lot of companies are really determining now that there's so many ways that they never thought they could be flexible before, that now they can be more flexible than they ever anticipated. And these types of things are much more functional for them. So no, I think they've been very spot on. So thank you very much. And then going to the unknown, we have insurance. I know you can have coverage for terrorism acts and hurricane and wind and flood. And now, and actually there was an insurance, I saw somebody that had pandemic coverage. And so now, Chris, as a business owner, is this another thing I have to throw on the pile, pandemic coverage?
So maybe. Every client, every business model is unique. And there has for a long time been coverage for pandemics. It's called Parametric Insurance. Wimbledon has purchased it for about 18 years, and they were the ones who had to trigger it. It cost them about $2.1 million a year for 18 years, and they never had to claim. And then once this happened, they got a $146 million payout. So you have insurance and hope you never have to use it, but you pay for it for that exact type of purpose. Parametric insurance is extremely expensive, and it is very much a trigger specific coverage. So unless for example, with catastrophes, unless a earthquake exceeds a 5.5, if it's a 5.4, your policy won't trigger. There are very specific clauses within parametric coverage. Now, that being said, the state and national legislation, they're trying to find a happy medium to create something called PRIA, which would be Pandemic Response Insurance Act. Essentially, the federally backed equivalent of the terrorism coverage from 2001. TRIA has been available since 9/11, has never paid a claim, but it's available for everyone and is legally required to be offered to all policyholders on most every line of coverage. If that ends up getting passed, you will see another acronym on your policy, which would be specific to pandemics. And again, these types of coverages would have certain thresholds that have to be met before A, the carrier will trigger, and B, the government to step in and cover losses in excess of the carrier's requirements. So yes, it will probably be something that's available. Yes, it's another line item to add, but not every company needs these things. Every business model, again, is very different. And so I would highly recommend consulting with your insurance agent and with your office manager, your CFO, your CIO, and seeing what makes sense, because everything does come at a cost. As we all say, everything is insurable. What are you willing to pay for it?
Without a doubt. And these days, because of all the crazy things happening in the world, in the yachting world specifically, my goodness, there were 2 more yacht fires this last week that make the carriers even much more reluctant to get involved. But staying in the business realm, workers' comp. I know that Lindsay mentioned earlier under the Coronavirus Response Act, workers' comp, and does this COVID type stuff, is that triggering a workers' comp, or is that the Families First Corona's response? And how do I, as a small business, how do I maneuver that? And also in that same breath, if I have people working from a federal standpoint and they need the longshore insurance, where does that trigger in on that as well, Chris?
That is a great question. And with respect to workers' compensation, every state regulator has a different response. NCCI, which covers most states that are not monopolistic, at least, and I can only speak for simplicity as to how Florida state regulation applies. But in that realm, workers' compensation does not extend for COVID claims because, and it is very specific, it is considered a common illness. It is not a work-related disease or bodily injury, with the exception of healthcare workers, police, fire, and protective services, and first responders, because that is an inherent risk of their jobs, because they're inherently coming in contact with people who can be contagious. They are not exempt from that. But workers' comp as a whole is not intended to cover common illnesses. They are treating COVID like the flu. And to further,
it's a coronavirus, just like the flu, just like the common cold.
That's the only way that they can really apply it uniformly. And again, this is Florida. California is going to be different. Oregon's going to be different. Massachusetts is going to, every state is going to have its own take on this, while a lot follow Florida rules because a lot of states look to Florida for regulatory control, at least with respect to insurance. It's going to be unique. You do have to double check your state laws, your state regulations, and really consult with your insurance agent to make sure that it is or is not covered. Now, with respect to Longshore and Jones Act, since we are in the Superyacht realm, Longshore also is going to have, in order for it to be compensable, you have to prove causation. And it is near impossible to prove that you contracted COVID in the act of working. If you are a electrical contractor or a mechanical engineer who is coming into a shipyard to work on a yacht, and you have tested positive weeks later, where can you prove with documentation that you contracted it in service of that vessel? That level of expectation of proof is going to be very difficult. So on the longshore side, unless the vessel owner's crew that you come in contact with have it, there's not really a good remedy for securing coverage through federal. And again, if you do contract it from crew and the vessel owner did not disclose that the crew had tested positive or that the crew were carriers, that's a whole different longshore claim. That's a 905B claim, and that could be a real hairy mess for the vessel owner. But as far as longshore coverage goes, it's not really going to extend for COVID either, for the same reasons that State Act it does not. Now, Jones Act, on the other hand, you do not have to prove causation. And we're seeing that create a rampant spike in claims and losses with respect to P&I. P&I clubs that cover large tankers, that cover the cruise ships in particular, and not only with respect to maintenance and cure, but also unseaworthiness. So there is the exception, but that is very specific to crew members or those who are in service of a vessel in excess of 30% of its time. It's really going to be a very small portion. Most of the members of the U.S. Superyacht Association shouldn't have much of an MEL exposure, but it certainly is going to cover this type of a claim.
Wow. Yeah, that's great to know. I mean, it's like everybody thinks that this is like such a crazy thing, and who knew ever expected to have, I mean, when we were getting our plans together for the Palm Beach show in February, never expected that we'd be here in mid-May looking at shows like the Monaco show and potentially not happening, or if happening on a much smaller scale. The world that we have come to take so much for granted has changed, and it's a dirty world, but thank God we have people like Ryan Jurney and his crew over there to make it so that we can feel safe and not have to live in bubble wrap. So I've been very fortunate to have had Ryan and his team when I was renovating where we have our office in my house last summer, and it was like, hey, we need this done like tomorrow, and can we get a crew in here? And they cleaned out so much dust and so much stuff in such rapid time, and you could practically lick the floors. These guys were that good. But so I just want to say, so Ryan, short of spraying Clorox on ourselves and such, talk about a little about some of the ways and some of the things that are really helping companies. And because I used to be able to buy a bottle of isopropyl alcohol at the drugstore for 99 cents, and if you can find it, it's like $5. So help me here. What do we do? What does a company do to keep themselves clean? How do we find these things to put our hand washing stations, etc.?
Sure, absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. Kitty, thank you for having me. And yes, really the biggest change that we're seeing now as far as janitorial is concerned is normally work in an office, corporate setting, whatever it might be. The janitorial staff would come in, take out your garbage, dust your desk. Really nothing else gets done. Now the focus has become touchpoint cleaning. Touchpoint cleaning is something that's done regularly at children's daycare, for example. And what really is the focus is you have areas in your office that are going to come into contact by employees very frequently. Doorknobs, the thermostat, keyboards. If you have a refrigerator, the handle on the refrigerator. If you have stairs, the handles on the stairwell. So these are now items that we've shifted our focus, and our crew has gone in and they're trying to clean and disinfect these as frequently as possible. There's obviously issues, and I'll tell you, any company that gives you a 100% guarantee on a disinfection, if they're not being genuine, it's impossible. You just have the frequency of people coming in and out depending on the type of work you have. You would have to have someone disinfecting a space every 5 minutes. It's not feasible for a business owner. It's not feasible financially or just from the personnel side. So the biggest thing is really, focusing on those high impact areas, making sure they're clean, disinfecting them correctly. There is a misconception that if you kind of spray something with Clorox or bleach and wipe it down, you're good to go. The CDC recommends that most surfaces stay wet with a disinfectant for up to 4 to 5 minutes prior to cleaning. And obviously, again, you're running a business, I'm running a business. I don't want to sit and stare at my desk for 4 or 5 minutes while it's sprayed and have to clean it. That's why you'd hire someone like us to come in and take care of it. I also think it's worth noting, we have over 200 employees at this time. And to Lindsay's point, and I don't know, I was a assistant public defender here in Dade County, and I don't know, it's just I had too many bad situations with prosecutors, but I do like to kind of CYA, and we actually did have our employees sign documents that they received PPE, the amount of PPE they received, that they were given access to 2 cell phone numbers and our corporate number if they felt unsafe or wanted to speak to someone about working conditions. And we got everyone to execute a copy of that, send it back to us, and we love to remind them as frequently as possible. It's unfortunate, to Kitty's point, and as an attorney, you're kind of built in with this worst case scenario mentality, but there are maybe going to be some bad actors, and so we definitely did take as many precautions as much as we could, so to say. But as far as going to the point on the alcohol, it's true. The price gouging it sucks, for lack of a better term. It is insane. We're even having issues finding products through our vendors. Our vendors services companies nationwide for janitorial services. But the best, I would say, is if you can't get your hand on rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide, you can put each of them separate, of course, in a spray bottle. Don't dilute it with water. And both can be used to clean surfaces, and rubbing alcohol is safe on almost every surface, including leather goods. So if you want to disinfect your purse, your wallet, whatever it might be, rubbing alcohol, believe it or not, is one of your best bets. And
in lieu of that, I know I found at Crown Wine and Spirits, one of our wonderful sponsors and members, a bottle of Everclear. Just kidding. You can't find alcohol, but there's enough alcohol in Everclear to kill just about anything. Just say.
I know. And I saw that Tito's Alcohol had to release a statement asking people to not use their product as a disinfectant. But again, to your point, it's sad because common household items that would be extremely helpful during this time. You have people that are taking advantage, and if you do see price gouging, I've reported to the state of Florida if at all possible, because there are common household items that we could be using, especially in smaller office spaces, where it would alleviate a lot of the stress of having to have an outside company come in or the financial burden. But really, if you can, just from a janitorial point of view, if you could focus to the Touchpoint cleaning, I think it would make a lot of the employees just feel better, just because at the end of the day, you open a door, and then what do? You touch your face, you have an itch. And from what we know, based off the CDC, it's one of the easiest ways to transmit the disease, just because unfortunately it's something that can be destroyed relatively easily by washing your hands, but it can live on a surface for an extended period of time. So just making sure, the keyboards are major.
That's, you just said to answer, like, so this is one of the things I think that all of us touch, that and this. Hang on, our little mouse here, which on my virtual background is looking like it's possessed. But how would I clean that? I mean, what would be, if the liquid is supposed to stay wet for 4 to 5 minutes, how am I supposed to clean something that's got all these little grooves and crannies and like a English muffin of nooks and crannies here? And then how do I get the liquid back out without ruining my keyboard?
Right, and it's a pain, trust me. And what we do and what our staff
hire
does,
Gator.
Yeah. Well, what our staff has been trained to do for the electronics, and one of our biggest clients is actually a retail chain in Florida and Georgia that sells only electronic products. But it's, as far as the keyboard on a smaller scale, it's you spray the disinfectant on a cloth wipe, and then you just kind of wipe it down. So that way it's still, wet, but you're just constantly spreading it and not letting it seep into the smaller cracks and crevices. Because we do also offer the cold fogging to disinfect larger stores, the retail stores or smaller warehouses. And with that, it's a two-man crew. You have someone that's manning the actual fogging machine, and then someone that's behind them wiping down to make sure that the air droplets aren't getting into the computers, the TVs, the different products that this customer has. So yeah, I would, you get a clean rag, you put the disinfectant on it, but it's a pain. You got to take 4 minutes out of your day according to the CDC and just continuously keep wiping it down. And once you've, your timer goes off, then wipe it dry and you're good to go.
From the legal perspective, let me ask, and our lawyers in the room here, is it illegal to then ask your employees, so say at the beginning of the day as part of their new job description, to disinfect their workspace, or to have it be part of the employee's part of their job description? A new part of your job description is 4 times a day, here's the spray, and you have to disinfect all the touch areas for there. Is that something that they're allowed to do? They shouldn't do? Is it more, I'm not sure. Lindsay.
Yeah, so I think that it's fair certainly to encourage and require that your employees clean down their own workspace. At the end of the day, that's just part of their tasks. I would recommend, though, and the CDC is going to recommend, if you have designated personnel whose job it is to clean everywhere, so not just the workstation, but say, if you are asking for an employee to kind of clean the common spaces, that
Right.
You're also, as an employer, just making sure that they're provided with the proper PPE and the proper tools to do that safely. You're not increasing their exposure by doing that. But I certainly think that it's fair, and I'm not aware of any current regulation or law that's going to prevent an employer from asking that their employees do that. Now, whether or not, if they refuse, how are you going to handle that? Again, why are they refusing? But I certainly think to ask an employee to clean their own workstation is following guidelines.
Ryan, while we were still talking about cleaning, I see these commercials, these little pop-ups come up on all my social feeds these days about the UV lights. This is like the new cool thing. They're doing it supposedly in now all the subways in New York, and this UVC, et cetera, et cetera. Can you speak to that very quickly for our group here?
Sure. We're currently exploring that option. Unfortunately, it's a very expensive option. So you have it on public transportation. I know Amazon is experimenting with it in some of their Whole Foods locations, actually a robot that passes by the aisles. But yes, the UV lighting has been proven to be extremely successful. On a much smaller scale, I know you can go on Amazon and you can buy kind of like a small pod to put your cell phone in, some jewelry, and that'll disinfect it. But as far as on a large scale, if you wanted to go in and hit an office or a warehouse, that's not something that we currently offer. I know there are companies that do, but it's price prohibitive for us at this point.
Sure.
Again, given the situation, I'm sure the manufacturers and vendors of the machinery are taking advantage of that situation, but it's definitely something to consider depending on the size of your workplace.
Yeah, it's amazing how price-driven things are based on it's our whole system of capitalism. Now you can't go to a gym. Go and try and buy weights online right now. They're like 5 times what they were 4 months ago. I'm like, darn it. But does anybody out there have we have a question. The Department in Florida to send price gouging. Who would somebody report that to from a price gouging standpoint? And then also, what about halo in the AC or with the air conditioning about cleaning the air? Even though this particular virus isn't really necessarily an air being, it's more of a touch thing. Would that help with something? That was a question we had on the chat, Ryan.
Sure. We don't offer any kind of air conditioning purification services, but I was at my house, for example. I recently did my AC about 2 months ago, and I had installed the UV lighting as an additional factor that came with the AC. So it's again, if you have the money and you want to take the steps and you can find someone that'll go in and add that to your existing air conditioning system. Absolutely. It's one of those things where you're never going to be in a bad position you'll be more clean, if you will. And to Lindsay's point on the having employees clean their station, I think we've had success in not selling it as, oh, you're required to clean it. Our office staff, we said, look, I'm the owner of the company. I come in, I'm going to clean my workspace. I'm going to clean areas I've been to. You set the example, and you tell them, look, we're in this together. I don't want to get you sick. You don't want to get me sick. We each have families. We want to go home. And I think unless you're just a really bad, selfish individual, you're going to want to maintain a safe environment for yourself and others. So I think it's, you set the example from the top, and hopefully the rest of your staff will kind of fall in line.
On the topic, I'll chime in real quick. On the topic of having people clean their own workspaces and reporting purposes, I know Lindsay had mentioned it's ideal to have somebody who's dedicated to this task, whether it be janitorial or otherwise. Having employees sanitize and clean their own workstations, in addition, if they weren't already doing that, is not grounds for changing their work comp class codes. It does not make their job any more or less hazardous. Unless a employee's role is completely changing, everything can be status quo. You do not have to reclassify any of your employees unless their day-to-day operations have completely changed.
Great. That's something I never even considered. Yeah, who knew? It's a crazy world that we all live in, and I just wanted to say thank you all. We're getting down to the end, and unless somebody has a very specific question, I think the main things we have to make sure that we all do is wash your hands. Wash your hands. Try not to touch your face. The one thing I've learned from these Zoom calls is that I am evidently a very compulsive face toucher. But luckily I wash my hands a lot. So, but yes, wash your hands. If you're not feeling well, don't go out. Take care of yourselves. The U.S. Superyacht Association is going to continue to be here and work on your behalf, and continue our work with our counters around the country and around the world to make sure that we keep our industry relevant and functional. We're working on having a program next week to talk about, now that the boats are starting to move, where can they move to? Where are things starting to open up? We know that most of Europe is fairly closed, so that there's a lot of yachts still here in the United States. So that's our plan from next week. We're trying to make that happen, and we'll have more on that as things come along. I wanted to definitely thank Lindsay Massillon, Ryan Jurney, Chris Coleman. You guys are amazing. If you have any questions or need any of their, or would like to have a consult with Ryan on cleaning, or have their services, or Chris or Lindsay, we're going to make sure we put their information on how to reach them at the firms, and also on our website as well, that this particular program will be documented, has been recorded, and it will be on our YouTube channel as well. Thank you all so very much. And if you know somebody that would benefit from membership in the association, that's the only way we're surviving right now, guys, is through membership dollars. And so we appreciate you guys helping spread the word, having people join the association, since all of our events to this year have essentially been canceled. We've been doing these programs complimentary for our industry and for you, to help you continue to grow your business. We thank you for your ongoing support, and we're here to help you in any way possible. I hope that over this holiday weekend that you find some opportunity to unsocially distance yourself and have some fun in the sun and enjoy yourself, and stay safe, and we'll look forward to chatting with you next week. We love you all. Thank you so very much. Ryan, Chris, Lindsay, thank you again, and appreciate all that you do for us. And we hope you guys have a great and safe and happy, wonderful Memorial Day. Take care, guys.